Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe and turn on notifications. Leo Maxwell believed he understood the architecture of his life better than any man alive. It was a structure built over 12 years of marriage. Its foundation laid with shared dreams discussed in the late hours. Its framework reinforced by joint decisions on every trivial detail of their home in Crestwood, Colorado. The life he shared with his wife, Jenna, was his premier portfolio, diversified, stable, and consistently yielding returns of contentment. He thought its integrity was unshakable. At 42, Leo was a senior portfolio manager at a private wealth firm in downtown Denver. His reputation was forged in the crucible of market volatility. He could read financial charts the way an ancient mariner read the stars, spotting nascent trends, and identifying risks before they could metastasize into genuine threats. His professional existence was a symphony of patterns, meticulous analysis, and a sharp, disciplined instinct. It was a profound irony, then, that these were the exact skills that began to illuminate the hairline fractures in what he considered his most significant and personal investment. His wife, Jenna Maxwell, was 39. As the public relations director for a boutique luxury hotel chain, she was the living embodiment of curated perfection. She was articulate, ambitious, and possessed an organizational prowess that bordered on the supernatural. Her smile could disarm a hostile board meeting, and Leo always felt a surge of proprietary pride, watching her navigate corporate galas and social fundraisers. To the outside world, they were the Crestwood ideal. The successful financier, and the brilliant communications executive. Their home, a sprawling contemporary with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a yard manicured to geometric perfection, was the stage for their flawless life. Hosting elegant dinner parties, where the wine was always perfectly paired, and the conversation never faltered. Their partnership was a model of efficiency. Leo managed the finances, the investments, the long-term strategy. Jenna managed the aesthetics, the social calendar, the public-facing brand of their union. It worked, or so the data had suggested, for 12 years. The first anomalous data point appeared on a quiet Saturday in October. The crisp mountain air had a bite to it. They were in the kitchen, a cavernous space of stainless steel and polished marble, preparing dinner together. A curated playlist of soft jazz hummed from the built-in speakers. The atmosphere was relaxed, comfortable, a perfect representation of a decade-plus of domestic equilibrium. Jenna was dicing shallots for a vinaigrette, the rhythmic chop of her knife the only sharp sound in the room. Leo was scoring a duck breast, his focus absolute. That was when she spoke, her tone so casual, so utterly devoid of weight, that it took him a moment to process the words. A tone that was not casual, but practiced. A carefully calibrated indifference. "You know," she began, her eyes fixed on the cutting board. "I was reading this fascinating piece today, about ethical non-monogamy." Leo's hands paused. The scoring knife stopped, mid-slice. He looked up at his wife, expecting her to glance at him, to offer a wry smile, to signal that this was some intellectual curiosity. But she didn't. She continued her precise dicing, her expression as placid and unreadable as ever. "It's interesting," she continued, "the psychological framework some couples build to explore openness. I think it would be fascinating to even just understand the mindset, to see how that world operates." He forced a short, sharp laugh, an auditory maneuver designed to neutralize the sudden, uncomfortable pressure building in his chest. "Seriously? Where are you reading this stuff?" Leo tried to keep his voice light, a casual parry to her strange conversational thrust. But something inside him, a deep, primal alarm system, had been tripped. Jenna finally stopped chopping. She scraped the shallots into a small glass bowl and looked at him, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. It was a smile he had seen her use in difficult negotiations. "It's just a thought, Leo. Just curiosity. No need to get so serious." She moved toward him, closed the small distance between them, and pressed a light kiss to his cheek. The gesture felt like a dismissal. Then, as if flipping a switch, she changed the subject, launching into an anecdote about a demanding client she had to manage the following Monday. Leo tried to discard the conversation. He classified it as a random outlier. Verbal static from some sensationalist article. But the words, and the unnerving calmness with which she delivered them, remained. They echoed in the back of his mind over the next few days, a persistent, low-frequency hum he couldn't tune out. He was a man who trusted patterns. And he was beginning to suspect. A new one was forming. In the weeks that followed, Leo's analytical mind began to collect data. Small, seemingly insignificant details. That, when viewed in isolation, meant nothing. But when compiled, and cross-referenced, they formed a disturbing and undeniable pattern. His home was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a field of observation. Fact 1. The phone. Jenna, who had always been careless with her device, leaving it on the counter or the arm of the sofa, now treated it like a vital organ. It was always with her, clutched in her hand, or resting, face down, on the table beside her. When it buzzed, a new, silent vibration she had recently enabled, her eyes would dart to the screen with a speed that was almost imperceptible. She would read the message. Her thumb would tap out a quick reply. And the phone would be flipped over again, its screen a dark, silent secret. Fact 2. The social obligations. The networking events and client dinners began to multiply. What was once a monthly occurrence became a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, affair. She would come home late, smelling of expensive wine and a perfume he hadn't bought her, her face flushed with an energy that seemed to dissipate the moment she walked through their front door. Her stories were detailed. Almost too detailed. Filled with names of colleagues and descriptions of strategies discussed. To a casual listener, she sounded like a dedicated professional. To Leo, she sounded like someone who had rehearsed her lines. Fact 3. The rejection. One Tuesday night, a simple, routine evening, he suggested they go to the cinema. A small ritual of normalcy. Jenna frowned, rubbing her temples. "I'm exhausted, Leo," she'd said, her voice heavy with fatigue. "A long day. I think I just want to stay in." He accepted it. But 30 minutes later, she was upstairs. The sounds of her closet door opening and shutting. The soft spray of an aerosol can. She emerged, wearing a silk blouse more suited for a cocktail bar than a boardroom, and applying a fresh layer of lipstick. "A work thing just came up," she explained, not quite meeting his eye. "A potential new client is in town for one night only. My boss insisted I go. It's last minute, I'm so sorry." Leo watched her leave. He stood in the silent living room. The television casting a flickering, meaningless light across the empty space. The unease he had been feeling for weeks was no longer a dull hum. It had solidified into a cold, heavy weight in his gut. It was the same feeling he got just before a market correction. The quiet certainty that a crash was imminent. Leo Maxwell was not a man who waited for a crash to wipe out his assets. He acted. His decisive nature, the very quality that made him a formidable portfolio manager, now pushed him toward a course of action he would have once found unimaginable. He could not ignore the data. The next morning, after a night spent staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying every anomaly, every lie disguised as an excuse, he made a call. Not to a friend. Not to family. He called Samuel, a divorce attorney whose chaotic finances Leo had helped untangle years ago. "Sam," Leo said, his voice steady, devoid of emotion. "I need a recommendation. A private investigator. Someone discreet, fast, and thorough." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by the weary sigh of a man who heard stories like this every day. "Leo, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll give you Frank Cole's number. He's the best I know. If there's something to find, Frank will find it." At this moment, Leo felt no sadness. He felt no rage. He felt only a cold, chilling clarity. He was no longer a husband trying to understand his wife. He was an investor, initiating a full audit on a compromised asset. The search for the truth had officially begun. Leo met Frank Cole at a nondescript diner miles from Crestwood. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths, and coffee that tasted of bitterness and time. Frank was a man in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair, and tired eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen too many sordid stories to be surprised by anything. Leo laid out the facts as he would in a client briefing. The timeline of behavioral changes. The phone. The sudden increase in work-related outings. He spoke with a detached precision, omitting emotion, presenting only the observable data. Frank listened, nodding slowly, jotting notes in a small, spiral-bound notebook. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered a professional assessment. "How long do you think this has been going on?" he asked, his voice a low gravel. Leo shook his head. "I don't know, weeks. Months. The duration is irrelevant. I need to know the truth." Frank closed the notebook. "Give me 3 days, Mr. Maxwell. 72 hours. You'll have your answer. Whatever it is." The next 3 days were the longest of Leo's life. He went through the motions of his routine. Client meetings. Market analysis. Conference calls. But his mind was elsewhere. He was a ghost in his own life. His thoughts tethered to Frank Cole and the truths he might unearth. At home. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. He watched Jenna, observing her every move with the focus of a predator. Every time she typed a quick message on her phone, he imagined the recipient. Every time she took a call and stepped out onto the patio for privacy, he imagined the conversation. He felt like a stranger in his own house, studying a woman who wore his wife's face, but whose actions had become alien to him. On the evening of the second day, she came home later than usual. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. "Another happy hour," she announced cheerfully, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. "The team is really gelling." Leo just nodded, his face a mask of neutrality. He felt a wave of nausea. He was living inside a meticulously constructed lie. And the air was becoming too thin to breathe. On the afternoon of the third day, his phone rang. An unknown number. He answered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Mr. Maxwell." Frank Cole's voice. Flat and direct. "We need to meet. Same place. 1 hour." The call ended. There was no preamble. No hint of what was to come. But Leo knew. In the profound, empty silence that followed the call, he knew. He drove to the diner with his hands locked on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He wasn't afraid of what he was about to learn. He was afraid of the man he would become after he learned it. The period of uncertainty was over. Now came the reckoning. They sat in the same cracked vinyl booth. The air in the diner was thick with the smell of stale coffee and fried food. Frank Cole didn't waste time on pleasantries. He placed a plain manila envelope on the table between them, followed by a small, black USB drive. His expression was grim, tinged with something that might have been professional pity. "I'm sorry, Leo," he said, using his first name for the first time, "but you need to see this." Leo's hands felt disconnected from his body as he reached for the envelope. His fingers trembled slightly as he undid the clasp. Inside was a stack of glossy 4x6 photographs. The first photo showed Jenna getting out of her car. Not in a restaurant parking lot or an office building. It was the underground garage of a sleek, modern condominium complex in Lodo. She was wearing the silk blouse from the night she was supposedly too tired to go to the movies. The next photo showed her at the door of an apartment, being greeted by a man. He was tall, with dark hair, and a smile that radiated an easy confidence. Leo recognized him instantly. Damian Vance, a lead developer for a rival real estate firm. Leo had seen him at industry events. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that Damian Vance was married. The subsequent photos were a brutal, silent narrative of betrayal. Jenna and Damian, kissing in the hallway, before the apartment door had even closed behind them. Jenna, laughing as Damian pulled her close, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The final shot was of the closed apartment door. Frank watched Leo's face. "There's more," he said softly. "She's been there 11 times over the past 4 weeks. 11 times. Always between 6 and 9 p.m. Always on the nights she told you she had a networking event, or a client dinner." Leo swallowed. A hard, painful lump in his throat. He felt physically ill. "And the USB drive," Frank said, nudging the small device across the table. "Audio. They were on the balcony yesterday afternoon. The windows were open. I got a clean recording. Leo pulled his laptop from his briefcase. He felt a strange sense of detachment. As if he were watching a movie about someone else's life. He plugged in the drive. Put on his noise-canceling headphones. And pressed play. Jenna's voice filled his ears. Light and carefree. Do you think he suspects anything? A low, confident laugh. Damien's voice. Leo? Doubt it. He's too predictable. Always obsessed with his charts and his returns. I bet he doesn't even notice how often you're out. Then Jenna laughed. The same melodious laugh he had loved for 12 years. But now, it sounded poisonous. Curdled. It's true. He would never suspect. He thinks I'm so dedicated to my job. Poor Leo. A pause. Then her voice again, softer, more intimate. But you know, Damien, I was suffocating in that marriage. With you, I feel awake for the first time in years. Leo ripped the headphones from his ears. As if they had been seared to his skin. He snapped the laptop shut. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Trying to anchor himself against the tidal wave of rage, humiliation, and profound pain. Poor Leo. The words were a brand. Searing into his consciousness. It wasn't just the betrayal of her body. It was the betrayal of her respect. The casual, cruel dismissal of him. As a predictable, boring fool. Frank waited in silence. Finally, Leo opened his eyes. The pain had receded. Replaced by something cold and hard. His voice, when he spoke, was unnervingly calm. Thank you, Frank. How much do I owe you? He paid the man. Tucked the envelope and the USB drive into his briefcase. It felt like handling evidence for a trial. Leo, Frank said as he stood to leave. Take care of yourself. And don't do anything impulsive you'll regret. Leo just nodded. But as he walked out of the diner into the fading afternoon light, he knew Frank was wrong. He was, by nature, a man of action. And he had no intention of doing anything impulsive. Every move he made from this point forward would be deliberate, calculated, and final. He was going to liquidate this entire rotten affair. Leo did not go home. He drove to his office in the quiet, empty weekend building, the city lights of Denver glittering below like a field of shattered glass. He locked himself in his corner office. And for the next several hours, he did what he did best. He strategized. He didn't mourn. He organized. He called Samuel, his lawyer, and scheduled an emergency meeting. He logged into his financial platforms, reviewing every joint account, every shared investment, the deed to the Crestwood house. He worked with the cold, detached efficiency of a surgeon preparing for a difficult operation. He needed to protect his assets. To firewall the life he had built from the woman who had tried to burn it down. Then, he prepared for the confrontation. He arrived home just after 6 p.m. and waited. At 7:15, Jenna walked through the door, her face lit with her usual radiant smile. Hey, love, she said, breezy and bright. Sorry I'm late. The client event ran longer than I expected, but it was a huge success. The team is thrilled. She dropped her designer handbag on the sofa and headed toward the kitchen, where Leo was sitting motionless at the large marble island, his laptop open in front of him. You haven't eaten yet, she asked, her voice laced with feigned concern. Should I order something? She walked closer. But then she froze. She saw the expression on his face. A look she had never seen before. A chilling, absolute stillness. Leo? What's wrong? Are you okay? He didn't answer immediately. He slowly, deliberately, turned the laptop around so the screen faced her. Paused on the display was a high-resolution image from the video file. Jenna and Damien Vance, locked in a passionate kiss in the apartment hallway. Jenna went completely rigid. All the color drained from her face, her eyes widening in sheer, animal panic. Leo. That's not. She stammered, the words dying in her throat as the lie became impossible to sustain. Leo's finger moved to the trackpad. He pressed play. The audio from the balcony conversation filled the silent kitchen. Her own voice, light and treacherous, echoed off the stainless steel appliances. He would never suspect. He thinks I'm so dedicated to my job. Poor Leo. He paused the video. And finally looked at her, his eyes as cold and hard as granite. Poor Leo, he repeated, the words dripping with a bitter, controlled venom. An interesting choice of words, Jenna. She tried to move toward him, her hand outstretched. Leo, I can explain. I swear, it was a mistake. I never meant for this to happen. You never meant for this to happen? He interrupted, his voice rising just slightly but remaining razor-sharp. 11 times, Jenna. 11 times in the last 4 weeks that Frank knows about. And probably more before that. You didn't mean for it to happen, but it happened, repeatedly, while you looked me in the eye and lied about client dinners and networking events. Jenna began to sob, tears streaming down her face, her carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. The marriage was. It was boring, Leo. I felt trapped. I needed something. Something different. Something that made me feel alive. Yes, I heard, Leo finished for her, a humorless smirk touching his lips. Damien makes you feel awake. And I'm just the predictable, poor fool who would never suspect. He stood up slowly, walking around the island, deliberately maintaining his distance as if she were contagious. But you know what's truly fascinating, Jenna? That conversation we had. About ethical non-monogamy. It all makes sense now. What was that? A psychological primer to soften the blow? Or were you just testing the waters to see if I'd be naive enough to grant you permission to keep cheating, without the inconvenience of guilt? She shook her head frantically. No, it wasn't like that. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. Leo slammed his hand flat on the marble countertop. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot, making her jump. Stop lying. You weren't asking to explore something new in our marriage, Jenna. You were asking for my retroactive approval of your infidelity. You wanted me to validate your affair, so you could keep sleeping with Damien Vance without the weight of being a liar. Leo, please, she begged, her hands clasped together. I love you. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. But I love you. We can get past this. We can do therapy. I'll end it with him, right now, I swear. Leo laughed. A hollow, painful sound that held no joy. You love me? Did you love me when you laughed at him calling me predictable? Did you love me when you walked into his apartment, eager to be in another man's arms? What kind of love is that, Jenna? She sank to her knees on the polished floor. Her body racked with uncontrollable sobs. I ruined everything. I know I ruined everything. But please, give me a chance. Just one chance to fix this. Leo looked down at the crumpled figure of his wife. For a fleeting second, he felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. But then the image of her laughing with Damien flashed in his mind. And any trace of compassion was extinguished, cauterized by the white-hot certainty of her betrayal. You had every chance in the world, Jenna. 12 years of chances. And you chose to throw it all away. He picked up the go-bag he had packed earlier. I'm sleeping at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow morning, I am meeting with my lawyer. You will be served with divorce papers by the end of the week. I suggest you find your own counsel. Leo, no. Please don't do this. She started to crawl a few feet toward him, but he was already walking away. He paused at the kitchen doorway, and looked back at her one last time. Oh, and Jenna, he said, his voice flat and final. You bet on the wrong man. I was never as predictable as you thought. He walked out, leaving her alone in the wreckage of their beautiful kitchen. Her sobs echoing through the large, empty house he had already decided to sell. The ensuing months were not a period of emotional turmoil for Leo. They were a period of intense, focused activity. He treated the dissolution of his marriage like the liquidation of a failed and fraudulent asset. Emotion was a liability. Efficiency was the goal. The legal process was initiated swiftly. He was fair. But he was not generous. He protected the assets he had built. Jenna's repeated calls went to voicemail. Her long, desperate emails were forwarded, unread, to his lawyer. All communication would be handled through official channels. But the divorce was only one part of the equation. There was still an imbalance in the books. There was Damien Vance. Leo knew that true justice required all responsible parties to be held accountable. One afternoon, he prepared a new manila envelope. Inside, he placed pristine copies of the photographs, and a new USB drive. He included no note. No explanation. The evidence was eloquent enough. He addressed the package to Amanda Vance, Damien's wife, at her home address. He mailed it from a post office in a different town, an anonymous agent of consequence. The effects were immediate and catastrophic. Less than a week later, the rumors began. Damien Vance had been thrown out of his house. His wife had filed for divorce. His company placed him on an indefinite leave of absence to handle his personal matters. The thrilling, secret affair that had made Jenna feel so awake had collapsed under the harsh light of exposure. Jenna, too, found her world shrinking. The social circle she had so masterfully curated turned its back on her. At work, the whispers followed her down the hallways. The respect she had commanded was replaced by suspicion and judgment. For Leo, the devastation was a catalyst for transformation. He sold the Crestwood house, refusing to live among the ghosts of a life built on a lie. He bought a smaller, modern apartment in uptown Denver. A clean slate. He channeled his pain and anger into his work, and his portfolio thrived. He also began seeing a therapist to conduct a post-mortem and implement stronger emotional risk management protocols. 6 months after the confrontation, Leo was at a coffee shop. A woman, distracted, bumped into his table, spilling her latte. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," she said, her voice filled with genuine mortification. Leo looked up and saw a woman with warm, intelligent eyes and a kind, apologetic smile. "It's fine," he said. "No harm done. Please, let me buy you another coffee," she insisted. He hesitated, but something in her straightforward sincerity made him agree. They ended up talking for over 2 hours. Her name was Sophie, a history professor, divorced for 3 years. The conversation was easy, unforced. She spoke openly about her own divorce, about the quiet joy of rebuilding a life on her own terms. Leo found himself sharing a brief, redacted version of his own story. Sophie listened with an empathy that was free of judgment. "Infidelity says everything about the person who cheats," she said quietly, "and nothing about the person who was cheated on. You didn't deserve that, Leo." They exchanged numbers. They started meeting for coffee, for walks in the park. It wasn't a romance. Not yet. It was a friendship built on a foundation of honesty. Sophie never hid her phone. She never offered vague excuses. Her life was an open book. And for Leo, that transparency was more comforting than any grand gesture. 1 year to the day after he had walked out of his old life, the divorce was finalized. Jenna had moved to another state. Damien Vance had lost his job and his family. The apartment in Lodo was back on the market. That evening, Leo was having dinner with Sophie at his apartment. The city lights twinkled outside. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, acting so fast. Confronting her that same day. Leo considered it for a moment, then shook his head. "No. Waiting would have been worse. It would have meant choosing to live with the lie, even for one more day. I needed the truth immediately. Not more falsehoods disguised as normalcy." Sophie smiled and reached across the table to take his hand. "You were brave. A lot of people would have pretended not to see it, just to save something that was already dead. You chose your own dignity." He squeezed her hand, a feeling of profound gratitude washing over him. He had learned painful, invaluable lessons. He learned that he deserved a partner who valued loyalty as much as he did. Someone who didn't hide their truths behind casual conversations or fabricated client dinners. And most importantly, Leo learned that while justice is not always swift, the act of protecting one's own integrity and rebuilding a life with honesty is the greatest victory. He had lost a faithless wife and a hollow marriage. But he had gained something far more valuable in the exchange. The unwavering certainty of who he was. And what he deserved. As Sophie laughed at a joke he made, her eyes crinkling at the corners, Leo realized he had made it to the other side of the storm. And here, on this side, scarred, but stronger, he could finally, truly, breathe. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.